Welcome to the Stories Are Soul Food podcast, presented by Cannonball Books, the kids' fiction imprint of Cannon Press.
Welcome to the Stories Are Soul Food podcast.
Welcome to Stories of Soul Food to Sess.
It is a balmy Tuesday, and it's the time we record.
The sun is up, the sky is blue. We're going to sit in a dark room and talk to you all about stories, food for souls, things like that. I may or may not have a little rant about Jane Austen ready today.
Yeah?
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Okay.
see if I can work it in.
You gonna work it in? Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Okay. Well, that's great. Let's start out then maybe with, I don't know if you saw, you got into a nice top 5 book list recommendation on Christianity Today.
I did not see that. No.
Yeah.
I don't see stuff like that.
Well, I knew you didn't, and that was a rhetorical question.
I don't read reviews. I don't check lists.
Can I read some of this review?
I'm not here for the pageant, people. I don't wear a sash. I don't enter the swimsuit competition, although I would easily win.
You do know that I'm not just bringing it up because it was a recommendation of 5 lesser-known children's fantasy series that point to the gospel.
Lesser known. I'm like, come on. Lesser known.
No.
Who wrote this? Who assembled this list?
I don't know who. It's Catherine Butler. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Very kind of her to include you, but also
Thank you, Catherine. This is a lesser-known Catherine, also a lesser-known Butler. But go ahead.
And a lesser-known children's fantasy author to go with it.
Yeah. Then we reach a lesser-known podcaster discussing his lesser-known listing.
I thought you'd enjoy that. But here, the reason I include it is because it is a review packed with the most warning tape that I've ever read.
Fantastic. Just first off, tell me which series it is.
It is The 100 Cupboards.
Okay. Well, then now that lesser known thing is out. It was like, if it was Outlaws of Time, I'd be like, okay.
It's lesser known.
It's lesser known. Outlaws of Time, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Lesser known.
The truth is, other people on the list are the lesser known ones.
Cupboards. I'm like,
it's what I mean, it's everywhere. It's in how many languages?
20, over 20.
Yeah.
So it's in, last I counted, somewhere it's 24 to 30 territories internationally, 12 or 20 languages in translation.
Yeah. Okay, but that's not why. We don't have this here to argue with the headline.
Yeah, whatever. I do find it funny. I shouldn't be offended by that. I shouldn't be offended at all.
I read it because I knew you'd pick up.
I think it's funny though. If I would even maybe spot her a little grace if it was Ashtown. But like, whatever. Yeah. Ashtown's not in as many foreign territories. It's not like it's not an international bestseller. I could give her lesser known around Ashtown, but
yeah,
Cupboards is tougher.
Well, 1 well-known fantasy author and 4 lesser known is.
No, I embrace it. You know what? I want to be a lesser known fantasy novelist from now on.
It's in your byline from now on.
From now on. Welcome to Stories of Soul Food. This is the podcast hosted by Brian Cullen, lesser known fantasy novelist, N.D. Wilson.
Yeah. This was passed along to us by a friend, Joe Rigney.
I like that neither of us noticed this, and somebody else had to send it to us.
So we point out, as a caution, these books, while thrilling and compelling, are too scary for most young readers. The antagonist is truly creepy, and there are some grotesque descriptions and violence that might induce nightmares.
Ooh.
While the other books on this list are great read-alouds for many ages, this one is best reserved for kids 12 and up,
who like to read in silence in the corner in the daylight.
The creepy ones,
rubbing their hands together.
Yeah, I think Joe pointed out that it looks like they want Henry to be wearing his helmet in order for this to be.
Oh yes, and in the car seat till he's 9.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah,
I will say this. This is a perfect segue into one of my favorite stories about getting kicked out of a school on a book tour. I was a public school. I've been kicked out of a Jewish school also. Private Jewish school, synagogue school, or whatever they're called.
Okay, great.
So that one was in San Francisco. This one, I don't remember where it was, but I was in some public school. It's all a blur. I can remember the hallway. I remember the school. I don't remember what state or what city I was in because these things are confusing once you're on an airplane nonstop.
And a tour. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're going and going and going. But I walk in, it's school visitation day for me, and hooray, hurrah. These things are exhausting. I mean, these are, it gets wearisome, but you do the work. And so I get in here. I've been running ragged on this book tour, and I check in, like I've arrived. And on these book tours, by the way, they don't trust you, and they shouldn't trust you. The publisher, I mean, does not trust you at all. After all, you're a novelist, and so we all know that novelists are the worst kind of humans. And so you have a chaperone, you have a driver, and you have a chaperone. The chaperone is called a literary escort. And the literary escort's job is to make sure that you show up sober and on time, and that you behave yourself, that you don't successfully procure or use drugs, that you do not get drunk as a skunk or as any other animal, and that you behave yourself with the children. They have these literary escorts for adult writers as well, because we are not to be trusted when on the road. I got some. One of my favorite things to do when on book tour is to like get stories out of these literary escorts about the other novelists.
That's awesome.
And so I've heard some pretty phenomenal stories about my fellow writers who have toured some of these same spots. Ray Bradbury in particular, but he had some good ones, and some horrifying stories as well. Anyways, so this driver, because I cannot be trusted to Uber myself or to rent a car and get anywhere, this driver in this Lincoln town car has dropped me off in front of this K through 6, and the literary escort has, dragged me by my ear through the front door and frog marched me to the office, where I am going through a security check, and I have been checked in, and then I am heading off, and then I am met by a school district official who lets me know that he has, in his, if not infinite, but rather large wisdom, canceled the school visit that day. And like, okay, I mean, whatever. But for me, that means I'm going back to the hotel. I might actually sleep. And for the publisher, like, no, they're the ones who hired a literary escort, a Lincoln town car, and paid for a hotel and flew me around. And also lined up a bookseller who has now transported a large quantity of books to this place. And actually, it's ringing a bell. I think it was in Salt Lake City where this happened. But it's because I think I remember which bookstore it was.
The details are floating to the
surface. I remember the
surface.
face of the bookstore manager who was here, and I remember how horrified she looked. And I saw her later on another tour at her store, so I think I can place her in that city. But anyway, he tells me this is not happening. Like, puts his foot down, and this is not. I'm walking to the room, to the big auditorium. And he has blocked the way. He is like Apollyon straddling across the way. And tells me it's not happening. And I say, as one does in these situations, why? And he says, well, we had a situation last night. And like, okay, last night, what is this? It's like, one of the students had a nightmare.
Oh, no. A nightmare.
A nightmare. I'm like, really? Oh, okay. Like, a student had a nightmare. And like, really, the bookstore manager was really upset about this. You're banning me from speaking to the children because one of these hundreds of students had a nightmare. My son had nightmares about the illustrations in the Narnia Chronicles. It's like, this is these are things we have to overcome in our lives. And we kind of battle with him and we argue with him, and I do so more out of good faith trying to represent the publisher who's invested in getting me here, and this poor, sad bookseller lady who, she's put a lot into it, and she's the one who's going to actually make money here. I'm not. I mean,
right? Yeah,
I'm
your
not,
sales come.
Yeah, this is not
differently.
really. Yeah, this is not really going to matter much for me. But as we are defeated and we're being turned back and we're going to be shown the door and we're not going to be allowed into this particular school, a door opens far, far away on the other end of this long hall. And a little girl, I think she was 4th or 5th grade, steps out. She's straight out of Central Casting, picture perfect, cute, freckles, ideal.
Yeah.
Steps
elementary
out into the hallway, sees me, and then comes at a dead sprint from like 50 yards away down this hallway while hugging the book, 100 Cupboards. She's hugging the book.
Oh.
And she comes sprinting up, functionally like hair and pigtails, freckles, the whole thing. She is so excited. And she comes sprinting up, like overjoyed, bubbling with excitement, and comes like sliding up to us out of breath and calls the principal by his name. I don't remember. We'll let him disappear into obscurity. And she says, I'm so excited. I love this book so much. And says something along the lines of like, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Like, and she's like, it's so creepy. I totally had a nightmare last night. She was the girl.
No.
This was the one.
And she loved it. I was gonna joke that she'd probably had a nightmare about it, but she was the one.
She was in fact the one. And I kind of laughed, and I turned to the principal. I say, is she the one? And he's like, well.
I love it. I love it.
And I said, do you want to tell her or do you want me to? And we all kind of stood there, and she's bouncing up and down. And she's like, when are you signing the books? Are you going to be signing the book? Can we buy the other book? Like she's over the moon. And let's just say we had the event.
You had it.
We had it.
We
had the event. However, because the guy was a jackass, he forbade the bookstore from selling any books.
No.
Yes.
Petty.
Yeah, he forbade the bookstore from selling any events. He forbade the bookstore from selling any books. But I was allowed to speak to the children's and sign their books. And I actually ended up signing. It's one of those sad moments where I had to sign huge quantities of worksheets and review questions and like homework.
Because they didn't let them buy books.
About cupboards. So they had done, especially these 4th and 5th graders had read through 100 Cupboards, and they had all drawn pictures, and they had questions, and it had been a read aloud. So contra to this person's recommendation, it had been a read aloud in those classes. So those who did not have their own copies had drawn pictures and other things. So I was just signing loose pages for them. And
oh man.
Yeah, but I've done that a lot as well. Especially in like poorer schools where kids can't afford their own copies or whatever. I'll sign sign a lot of workbooks and things like that. But Cupboards is really funny because I have so many people who are so concerned about the creepiness, but objectively the content is significantly less gruesome, significantly less gratuitous than any number of things they allow and tolerate in fiction or in film or in other things. It's not over the top. It's just, I would like to say, even though I shouldn't, well written. And so if you write a scene well and it's creepy, like, okay, I have a villain. Here's a villain, but I'm going to write the villain effectively, as opposed to I'm going to write the villain like a paper doll that you're not actually scared of, or I'm going to make the villain be a tomato that you could easily, stomp on and not be afraid of. Well, that affects you differently. So it's amazing to me how many. Well, I'm going to sneeze here. Hold on a second. It's amazing. It's amazing. You can edit that out or keep it in however you want. We can keep that in. Authenticity in this podcast.
We're all about it.
Authenticity at all costs. If you write effectively and you write to the 5 senses, then creepy things are creepier.
Yeah. Defeating.
I sneeze when I even think about people who try to censor me from
Well,
speaking to the children.
I was going to say that we're currently dealing with the nightmare test right now at home because, we've read The Hobbit out loud, but now my son is reading it at night with his own nightlight. And he's called me in saying, I think goblin.
Down the goblin town.
Yeah, exactly. I think that Gollum is in my room, or I imagined he's in my room crawling up the bunk bed, which is, nightmare inducing.
Yeah. He's not.
He's not. Just to be clear.
Yeah. Hey, kid.
Yeah.
He's not.
Oh, and by the way, he was enjoying it. He also was saying, I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
It gave me a nightmare.
And so at some point you have to say, so here's the thing we have to learn is self-control of our imaginations. We need those imagination muscles to get strong. And yet we also have to learn how to put a bit and bridle on them and not let them just run away. And so we don't say, let us deal with this, nightmare risk by not having an imagination or not engaging with anything imaginative at all. But anyway, all that to say is the lesser known book 100 Cupboards has been known to provoke the occasional nightmare. I'm not gonna lie, it does. People get freaked out by some of the descriptions.
Yeah,
and those descriptions are that it's cold. I describe a room as getting cold. It's like you open a door and air in the room starts getting sucked into this cupboard and dust is rolling across the floor into that cupboard and the temperature drops. It's not, ain't no thing. But if you describe it effectively and you set the percussion of the prose effectively and you actually have, kind of the score of the writing and the tone of the moment is such that you can really get people to feel it. You can actually get them to feel it. Then it can be far more impactful than something that's a lot more gruesome, gratuitous, over the top, but you don't feel it. You feel very distant from it. It doesn't actually touch you because the writing's not as effective.
So you're kind of saying that it would be possible to write same events much worse and have them, a much lower nightmare quotient.
100%.
Because you're not going to feel it.
And this is a perfect transition into my Jane Austen rant.
Here we go.
It actually kind of is. I'm not even forcing it. So I am going back through Sense and Sensibility right now because I figured, why not? It's been a while. And she's one of those writers that I feel requires a revisit upon occasion. And she does this thing. Well, backing up, a lot of people comment on how Jane Austen doesn't do the melodramatic, right? She's quiet drama.
Yeah.
She's the observer of characters. It's small motions. It's comedy.
It's living rooms.
She's very, very good, very, very good at drawing characters in living rooms. But she doesn't do the melodramatic. It's all small motions. But it dawned on me finally that she doesn't because she's just chicken.
Interesting.
Now, I don't know that it's bad, but she's just a chicken. She doesn't have the correct oven mitts to handle the heat, but her desire is for the melodramatic. Her instinct is for the melodramatic, but she recoils from it and she needs a little extra distance from it. And so she creates an added layer of distance to prevent herself from having to deal with the stories that would be more Bronte-esque directly. So we see this in Pride and Prejudice with the tales of Wickham.
Yeah.
Wickham the rogue. Wickham is not so much a rogue in Pride and Prejudice as he was back yonder over there in Darcy's past. Right? So there's quite a melodramatic story back there, over there in that backstory that Darcy has to tell, one degree of separation. She's willing to pop the Russian doll open and have a character within her story tell a story about something that was wildly Bronte-esque.
Trying to seduce the younger sister.
So seduction. We don't have there's no sex in Austen, I've heard said often. Oh yeah, there is. There totally is. But it's just one degree of separation. It's Darcy telling the story of Wickham who seduced his sister, but this story doesn't tell that story. Darcy tells the story of seduction inside this story.
Right.
And going through Sense and Sensibility.
And in that one, by making her a child, you avoid a bunch of stuff.
Yeah,
too.
exactly. So, but then in Sense and Sensibility, you have Willoughby. And you actually have Willoughby and Colonel Brandon. And Colonel Brandon tells the story of how he was going to elope to Scotland with his beloved. But then, then his evil father married her off to his brother, and he was shipped off to the East Indies with his regiment. And his brother, who didn't love this girl, who was 17, married her for her money, and she was forced into it and became so miserable. And she ends up sleeping around and having an illegitimate child and dies of a consumption.
Okay.
And you're like, wow, Jane. It's like,
it's just 1 degree of separation.
Yeah,
you're saying that's like Dickens level of.
Yeah, that's straight Dickens. That's full Bronte.
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
a Bronte sister. I mean, but she just doesn't, she like puts on the oven mitts to deal with it and gets a little bit more distance.
Do you think it's so? Okay, are you you then?
Now that is the
let
way
you
this
finish.
connects.
Yeah.
To justify talking about this right now is the exact thing you just said. Could you write the same exact scene, but have it be even more melodramatic or more overblown, but write it in such a way that affected people less? And the answer is yeah, of course you could. And she does that. So we have, like, you can tick the boxes of like, okay, so Colonel Brandon's beloved was confined physically. She was like imprisoned, had a marriage that bordered on rape.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, so bordered on rape. She then was seduced into adultery. Her fiance, prior to this borderline rapey marriage, was shipped off of the regiment to the East Indies.
Mm-hmm.
She sleeps around, gets pregnant with an illegitimate baby, becomes a whore, ends up in a debtor's prison, and then dies of a consumption.
Mm.
Like,
that is not what you think of when you think
Jane Austen.
Yeah.
And yet it's all in there. It's all in there, but she sets it just over there, and Colonel Brandon sits down. He tells the story to Eleanor about him having lived a Bronte story, about him having lived this Dickens story. It's like I had this wild melodramatic thing, and you can hear the little piano playing and the guy popping his collar and twirling his mustache, and it's all very, very melodramatic. And then you get right back into the living rooms of Jane Austen. But it's really weird. Like, she has this, she's drawn to it, and she does that. Like, she needs to like embed it in her characters, especially the men she loves, Colonel Brandon, Darcy. She embeds it in these male characters that she admires and respects. They have to be deeply wounded by incredible melodrama.
Didn't she try to do it when in Northanger Abbey? Isn't that the one where she tried to go full drama? And I'm speaking as someone who has only read about, has not read.
Is that what we would say about that one? Would we say that it's an attempt to go full drama? And that's I mean, most people would say it's like the least favorite. It's frequently cited as a least favorite.
I heard it as her Gothic. She's trying to tell her Gothic story, which to me says melodrama. She's taking those steps toward. But of course, if you want to be on Jane's side, you say she's subverting the Gothic drama by showing its silliness. If you want to be, I don't know, maybe
I think she's proving her own susceptibility to it, because the characters that she most admires, Eliza and Eleanor, Eliza Bennet, Eleanor Dashwood, are deeply moved by the men who have navigated it. They're drawn to the men. And I think Jane herself is the most attracted to the men who've lived through these melodramas. I don't think she's in any way satirizing or criticizing it at all. I think she herself needs it, yearns for it, and is just a little bit chicken. I think she's just
interesting. All right.
I think she just puts on the oven mitts and says, hey, I'm not going to write this directly. I'm just going to have this character do it. He's going to tell you about it. But anyway.
Okay, so Pride and Prejudice, the watery scene, like the water one. Are you saying that's kind of Jane Austen's sensibility? Where Firth gets wet in the rain and they come and kiss. That often mocked scene.
Yeah.
Are you saying that's a little bit? You think that's what Jane would love to write?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that think about who Darcy is and the building of his character, and his character wouldn't be the thing that makes him lovable and respectable for Eliza is how he handled melodrama.
Yes.
How
okay.
he navigated it, right?
That
his
scandal.
his nobility amidst the storm of melodrama.
Okay.
And that's the attraction. So it's not that, he's running through the rain and, I don't
Yeah.
think that's her. But as a side note, I don't think her stories would be better if she went full gothic and brought it forward. I don't think she's doing this because it's better this way. I think she's doing this because she's chicken. But I do happen to think it's better this way. I think her books are better because she did it this way.
Yeah.
But this all ties in because if we jump over to kids fantasy and lesser known or greater known, if we jump over to kids fantasy and we talk through different series, there are places where people love to wax lyrical. They love to really overwrite. They use a ton of adverbs and they go on and on and on. And they never give you a concrete experience of a scene. People read the books and they have a memory of having read the books. They don't have a memory of having lived any scenes in the books. And I think that you want both of those things.
Okay.
And so a good author wants both of those things. I have very clear memories. I have no clear memories of reading the scene of Gandalf facing off with the Lord of the Nazgul in the gates of Minas Tirith. I have no memory of where I was. I've read that scene so many times.
Yeah, you're right. It's not one I think of.
I don't remember where I was. I have no memory of which room I was in, which copy of the book I was holding. None of those things. I have so many editions and so on. I don't remember being at the lake reading it. I don't remember being in an airport reading it. I remember, and sometimes you remember like where you were the first time you read a scene. I do remember the smell of the pages of one particular edition that I love to read. I remember, and I associate it with Middle Earth and the Shire. And it's like, I have one, like that aroma is affiliated for me. But I have like very concrete memories of that scene. I do not have concrete memories of the prose. I have concrete memories of the scene.
Okay.
So I like the scene is what I have. And that's the goal of a good writer. So the goal of a good writer is to create a real incident and to actually transmit, to give memories of that incident to the reader. Now, you want to do it with beautiful writing such that they, particular lines jump out or they remember particular instances of prose. You want people to remember the first time they read something or anything like that. That's all fine. But more than anything else, you want them to remember like the scene.
I find that with scenes that I remember as a child that are actually slightly different when I reread them, like that's a sign in my imagination that it became something.
Yeah, that it was visceral and real in your imagination.
I was like, oh, I didn't quite remember it that way.
Yeah.
And I felt like I'd lived, for example, we just reading through the Fellowship and the whole Barrow White scene. Yeah. I have very vivid memories of that that turn out to not be quite based.
Not be quite based on the description.
On the description given by John Ronald.
Yeah.
No,
I feel that completely. And so I would challenge any of my readers who've read Cupboards, who love Cupboards, to tell me which scene they like. What do you like? And they'll give me a scene. And if I said, what's your favorite line in that scene? Like, why would that's just mean. That's dumb. Like, why would I expect them to remember the prose? The prose, its job is to get out of the way and to have effectively impacted, to have created a visceral experience, which impacted this person's memory and imagination, and not to have been the thing itself. And so I have plenty of friends who try to write, and there's a narcissism in it. And I don't mean this to be overly insulting. There's a narcissism in the writing of things that you're not serving the story or the scene with your prose. You're actually trying to have the prose be the thing. You want your writing to be the thing. This is the thing, as opposed to this is the bomb. This is the shell I'm dropping, and it's hopefully going to have this big impact in your imagination, and you're going to remember the impact. But I don't care if you remember this line. I don't care. As in a particular scene, I don't care if you remember the line. Now, if we're talking about intros to chapters, if we're talking about various moments of, contemplative moments or meditations or beats or these different times when I want them to get to know a character, and it's far more a beat of companionship. You're sitting on a bridge with Fat Frank, and he's got this to say. Those are the places where you remember a line. Or there's a place where you are in the aftermath or in the calm before the storm, sitting with the author, and the author is a character, and the author is, being descriptive, and you remember that description or this line or that line. That's great. That's part of it, because the author's a character and you're trying to establish a tone. But my goal always with my writing has been to, have the scenes impact, have the scenes live in an imagination and be as real as I can make them in those imaginations, so that they're independent of me and my writing. The writing has happened, it's done its work, and now the scene is remembered and retained, independent of my word choice. And so that is, I think, one of my wife has always laughed. She's always really laughed when people will tell her things like, oh, my kids love Harry Potter. They're huge Harry Potter fans or something like that. And I wouldn't let my kids read after book 3 until they were of a certain age, because it starts getting just so gruesome, so grim, and a guy is cutting off his own hand. He's ritualistically cutting off his own hand and stirring it into a pot to bring this guy back from the dead. And the only protection is that it's badly written, and so it doesn't feel real. It's kind of like, well, it's not that scary. So as soon as she's 10, I don't mind. It's like she can read that because she's not going to think that it really happened. But if I wrote that scene, like, yeah, no, you should wait till you're 16. let's hold off. So I don't mean to be like with cupboards and so on. I don't mean to be braggy about this, but it's just always been a goal, and I don't think it's been a goal for other authors in the same way, to make scenes be as visceral and as targeting all 5 of the senses as possible. So that's why people get spooked. Moms especially can be a little bit like, is this okay? Is it okay? It's like, it's a cat. It's a creepy cat, but I'm really nervous.
It's a bald cat.
It's a cat sitting on a kid's chest. It's not that big a deal. Get over it. It's like, it's not that terrifying.
Yeah, au contraire. It is pretty terrifying.
I know. It is. It is terrifying. But it's
in reality.
But the actual, like,
it's a cat.
If you describe the content of it, it's not that terrifying. But to have lived it, to have actually lived it would be truly terrifying. And so to have a story that approaches that, starts to approach that sensation is a little bit more terrifying than to have been more distant from a far more terrifying substance.
I wonder if you've put your finger on what makes literary fiction annoying, when it's adult novels that seem to be written just for the line.
Yeah.
You open the chapter and it's clearly somebody showing off their facility with words.
Yeah.
Or their unique writing style.
It's the different, I describe it as particular writers who love to watch their own hand move.
Oh, and, yeah.
It's like a speaker who, there are speakers who get up in front of the room and they're willing to completely forget themselves. And they're willing to absolutely forget themselves and do whatever it takes to serve the audience. Like, and their own opinion, their own reputation is completely a non-factor. And there's other speakers where the rhythm and inflection and everything they're doing, you feel like they're constantly watching their own gestures. They're watching their own hands.
Sort of posing.
Yeah, I'm watching my hand float. I'm using my thinky voice. This is my earnest voice. And now I'm using my thoughtful voice. And here, like, oh, isn't it a great sadness when we all are faced with such things? And they watch their hand float away as they gesture. There's so many writers who do that, and many of them are even good with words. And so some of their pages can be really fun to read. You know, it's like, but you're there just to watch the words go. You're there to watch their gestures as opposed to receive a narrative, receive a story, like, you know, receive a scene. And that's what I really prefer. So whenever anything becomes idea-based or prose-based, I struggle a little bit more.
Gotcha.
I want it to be a lot more transportive than that.
There we go. So we need to come up with a new list of nightmare-inducing authors that are lesser known.
What are the other fantasy lists that hit this?
Let's see. We've got AP.
Oh yeah, I was hoping Wingfeather's on there.
Yeah, Wingfeather, Andrew Peterson. Miss Mantle Chronicles by McAllister, which I have not heard of.
I have not either. Okay.
I
was hoping we're going to get some easy recommends for some people.
The Wilder King Trilogy by Rogers, which I have not read.
I like him. I don't know I don't know the whole trilogy.
Yeah. And then we've got an old favorite of the pod. The Green Ember series is on here.
Okay.
And you.
There we go.
So
that's too bad for all of us. What the heck is she thinking? There we go.
I think she's.
I don't know what she's. I think she's probably just trying to be nice.
So fantasy
I
series
will not be insulted, but I would be
point to the gospel is what she's trying to say. So she kind of gives the thematic, sweeping thematic.
Yeah. I think it would be fair. Like I said, it would be fair to say that Outlaws is lesser known. I would even concede on Ashtown. I think it's fair that Wingfeather is still lesser known. I don't think it's fair to say that Green Ember is at this point.
1 million copies, right?
Yeah, if you had 1 million copies in your series, I think you can kind of say like, for book series, I know that's a ton of units. I know there's a ton of different volumes. I think I'd have to ask Sam about like, okay,
but I mean, the main stories.
That million is broken across how many different volumes? Is that across 8 volumes, 6 volumes?
He's got 10.
Yeah,
but
on 10.
He's got 10, but only 3 in the main story. So
if it's 1 million
or 4
across
in the main story.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a lot of that's a lot of copies. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know the other ones.
It's funny that it's us.
Yeah. And of course, again, I don't know Catherine. She you
know what? Let me just be gracious and nice and say thank you. Like my mother taught me. Thank you for listing my book.
Yeah. Well, I Christianity Today subscribers do need to read N.D. Wilson, even if it gives their kid a few nightmares.
Especially if it gives your kid a few nightmares. I can honestly say, and this is a whole different can of worms, and I don't know how much more time we have in this particular podcast, but if 100 Cupboards gives your kid nightmares, you need to read it even more. It's more important.
Read it even harder.
Read it harder. You need to have read it even more so, and you need to lean in. I think I've told the story about making my son shoot aliens in a first-person shooter game after dealing with nightmares.
Oh yeah.
Overwhelmingly, parents have the wrong reaction. We react in the wrong direction over and over and over again.
You think my kid's scared, move him away from what he's scared of.
Yeah, I mean, all of us. It's not like I can sit on a high horse and say only other parents do this. This is something we all instinctively do. And I have 2 of my 5 children had incredibly vivid nightmares that moved into night terrors. I mean, really vivid imagination. And one of them was based off of Pauline Bain's illustrations in the Narnia Chronicles, as I already mentioned. Specifically, one illustration after the killing of Aslan on the stone table. And man, it haunted him. And it was just night after night after night. And they got worse and worse and worse until finally I did download a first-person shooter game on my computer at 1 a.m. Quake, an old school first-person shooter.
Alien blaster.
And I was up writing late because that's what I do. And he was like freaking out again. I was like, you know what, Rory, come in here. Like, it's time to toughen up, kid. Like, we got to get that imagination controlled. And so I brought him in to the computer and I showed him which button fired the shotgun. And I steered the little Marine running through this maze of aliens. And I was like, every time you see a monster jump out, push that button. and we're going to blow it to smithereens and blood's going to fly all over the place. And we just ran around. These monsters kept jumping out and I was like, blam, there goes all this blood, blam. And I was sitting there thinking, I'm even having a genius dad moment or I'm having a really terrible dad moment. This is going to be magnificent or this is going to be horrendous.
Only time will tell.
And so for about 30 minutes, we shot a bunch of aliens with a double-barreled shotgun and blew them up all over the place. And I prayed with him and put him back in bed, and he slept like a baby, and it was just fine. We never dealt with it again.
Nice.
And as I was putting him into bed, I was like, so if any monsters show up in your dreams, shoot them. Like, just fight. Don't run. Don't be scared. Fight. And that was it. We were done. And my daughter, number 5, that was number 1. Then we had 3 kids in between who they had normal nightmares, but not night terrors. Then my daughter had recurring dragon nightmares, serpent nightmares, massive night terrors. And she would have like open-eyed freak out nightmares, like night terrors that would take over.
I've had one of those. Those are,
and it would go and go and go and go. And I started doing that thing. It'd been a while. And I was like, plus she was my little girl. So I was not thinking the same thing of like, let's shoot aliens. And I was thinking like, what books do we have? Where do I need to control dragons? I need to like how do I get dragons out of our imagination? And I wasn't pursuing that fully, but that's like my instinct. Instinct is like, well, how do I de-risk? How do I de-risk the situation? And then instead, I was like, you know what? I just need to really lean in. And so I told her stories about lots of dragon stories. I just started telling her lots of dragon stories. And specifically telling her the stories of the fall from heaven and where bad dragons came from. And spirit dragons, the big serpents, the really scary ones, the ones you really have to worry about. Instead of it just being like, there's some down here, I was like, no, the really bad ones are like the star dragons.
The world serpent, all those guys.
So we went star dragons, Lucifer, Satan himself, the really, really scary ones. And I just leaned in on it and told her that they'd rebelled against God himself and he had thrown them down to earth. And that's why they're all down here with us. Like, but I also told her that for every bad dragon, there were 2 good ones. You know, it's like that he threw down a third of
that's a proof text right there.
Yeah, threw down a third of heaven, and that there was 2 star dragons who were good and obeyed God for every one that was bad. And then we talked about guardian angels and how there were angels that always saw the face of God who were especially to protect children. We did this whole thing. She was fine. Then it was a while later that we were at church and she pointed over my shoulder at a pep banner from Logos High School where a knight had fought a dragon. A knight had killed one. The dragon was dying. And she just said, there's my nightmare. And I was like, okay. So
that's where it was.
So she was getting her nightmare from church. So anyway, both times I've learned lean in. If you have a scaredy cat, if you have a kid whose imagination is, and by scaredy cat there, I mean like somebody whose imagination is really rocking them. It doesn't mean they're a bigger wuss. It means that they have, you know, kind of a Mustang of an imagination. You know, it's an imagination that's hard to control. And you have to get that bit and bridle on. And the way to do it is frequently the exact opposite way that you think. Like you will think, oh, we need to like tiptoe around it. We need them to read more rabbit books, less dragon books, more rabbit books. Like you just need to lean in. You should probably get gnarlier. You know, you should probably dial it up actually, and go a little bit harder. Get those calluses thicker. Get a little more blood on their boots, and and get there sooner. But anyway, those were my thoughts. But that's coming from the author of a book that gives kids nightmares. So you know you can't really trust me.
And with that,
that's the end. The end of SASF today.
Yep. Finished up.
See you again next week, in which I will not insult Jane Austen.
I wanted to thank you all for supporting the Stories Are Soul Food podcast. And I also wanted to tell you about Canon Plus some more. In fact, we got a special offer just for Stories Are Soul Food subscribers. Now, for a limited time, you can get a month subscription to Canon Plus for 99 cents with the code specially created for you guys by the Canon Plus team. The code is SASF99. So that is SASF99. It only works if you're a first-time user, and it only works at mycanonplus.com. I want to tell you about some new soul food, which is on Canon Plus now. This is a new documentary from Rebecca Merkel called Eve in Exile, and it has already released just this month on May 6th. Becca is, of course, Nate's sister, and she's a friend of the SASFA podcast, or at least we assume she's a friend, because she was a guest on episode 12 back in the early days to talk about building a library for your kids. So, Becca's documentary, Eve in Exile, tells the story of the failure of feminism in America. Basically, how American feminists have tried to pull down their houses with their own hands. But it's not a shrill political commentary with a bunch of Twitter hot takes. It's actually an attempt to get a conversation started around a simple question. Feminism promised that everything would get better for American women, but women are unhappier than ever based on their historic use of antidepressants. So if feminism was a scam, the question is, what's next? That's where things get kind of fun. Becca points out that whether you're someone who thinks pantsuits look kind of cool, or someone who thinks Little House on the Prairie style jumpers are much better, or someone who thinks they could go to a Regency-era ball with Elizabeth Bennet and her sisters, every one of those people is making the same fundamental mistake. They're reading personal taste into the question of how we recover from feminism. So how do we approach it? Kristen and I watched the doc, and one thing that Becca says is that if she could choose any time to live in history, it would be this time. Yeah, we're standing in rubble, but that means we have an opportunity to rebuild from scratch. And that is pretty exciting. Anyways, Becca's doc gives inspirational guidance on the way forward for Christian women. As I said, it's only available on Canon Plus. One more time, let me mention the code. If you're a first-time Canon Plus subscriber, then you can get access to Canon Plus for just 99 cents with the code SASF99. That's at mycanonplus.com. Watch the documentary, listen to the Green Ember audiobooks, all our other children's books, sermons, podcasts, good old video resources. I think you'll really benefit from a Canon Plus subscription, and here's a chance for you guys to jump on it for just 99 cents. Please do check out Canon Plus.